Discover the incredible 7 transformative lessons that will strengthen your spirit through illness. Jenna felt the sterile walls of Maplewood General close in around her, robbing her of breath. The bustling sounds of nurses and doctors faded, leaving only the echo of her own doubts. She was a nurse, a caretaker, and yet here she was, the patient. How could she embrace the lessons of resilience her father Frank had drilled into her, lessons that now felt like brittle shards of glass? The whispers of inadequacy wound around her heart, suffocating. Each visit for checkups felt like a death knell, dredging up familiar fears that clawed at the edges of her mind. What happened to being strong? As she shuffled through the crowded waiting room, she caught sight of Mr. Thompson, a frail man whose spirit shone brighter than the fluorescent lights. Every encounter with him was a revelation. He shared tales of his youth, tales filled with grit, but always managed to weave compassion into his narratives. "It's the strength of our connections that lifts us," he would say with a twinkle in his blue eyes. But even those words felt heavy on Jenna's heart. Why couldn't she just let the wave of weakness wash over her without drowning in it? Was vulnerability really a strength, or just an echo of cowardice? The tension thickened as Jenna stepped into the nurse's lounge, her thoughts racing back to her colleague, Melissa. Jenna had poured herself into every shift, her nights turning into mornings, caring for others while silently navigating her own shadows. Just as she began to feel her health returning, the announcement she had anticipated turned to ash in her mouth. Melissa was awarded the promotion that Jenna had aimed for to prove she could balance her life's weight without crumbling. What did it matter if she cared for her father and fought her own battles with grace? In a world that often favored charm over hard work, what had her struggle counted for? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Time seemed to stand still as Jenna prepared for her meeting with her supervisor. The fear of having her vulnerability dismissed rose inside her like a storm. What if they looked at her with pity? Would that cut deeper than the shame she already carried? Her mind flashed back to Frank and the wisdom he had instilled in her. "The world won't throw you a lifeline, Jenna. It's yours to create." But could she muster the strength to define her worth beyond the accolades? Would she be seen? Facing the door to her supervisor's office, she felt the weight of her father's tenacity and Mr. Thompson's wisdom in her veins, electrifying her resolve. With a deep breath, Jenna squared her shoulders, steeling herself. But just as she reached for the doorknob, a paralyzing wave of uncertainty washed over her. Would her words carry the power to manifest change, or would they only echo against the walls of indifference? The question lingered heavily in the air, poised to shatter her aspirations. As Jenna stood before the door, her heart raced, the thud echoing in her ears like a countdown to an uncertain future. She envisioned her supervisor's face, the polite yet inscrutable expression that had often made Jenna question her own capabilities. Taking a moment to scrutinize the wooden surface of the door, she drew on the lessons her father had imparted, grounding herself in the belief that authenticity could be the bridge to her aspirations. She turned the knob, letting it slide open with a reluctant squeak, revealing the sterile office within. The walls were adorned with motivational posters, yet Jenna felt the stark contrast between those ideals and her reality as she stepped inside. Prompted by an invitation to sit, she perched on the edge of her chair, fighting the instinct to retreat into her own mind. This was not merely a meeting, it was a chance to reclaim her narrative. "Jenna, you've been doing well," her supervisor began, scanning through notes with casual indifference. "I wanted to discuss your recent performance." The words felt bland, almost mechanical. Jenna was sure this was the moment she had to shift the conversation from a mere assessment of her recent work to a declaration of her worth. "I appreciate that, but this promotion meant a lot to me," she said, her voice trembling yet firm. "I want to discuss my career path, my potential for growth, especially after everything I've managed to handle personally. It was a gamble. Would she be dismissed as just a sympathetic case, or could she redefine herself in their eyes? Her supervisor paused, finally meeting her gaze. The moment stretched thin, allowing Jenna to feel every ounce of her uncertainty and defiance. What do you mean by everything? The supervisor probed, leaning forward slightly. Jenna took a breath, feeling the stinging pinch of vulnerability. I've battled illness, I care for my father, and I continue to give my all at work. Not just to keep up but to excel. I need you to see that my value is not just about my performance metrics, but the unwavering resilience I bring to my role. She almost expected the typical bureaucratic response, but instead, there was a flicker of recognition in her supervisor's eyes. Resilience is vital in nursing, Jenna. But you know, we're a place that values consistency above the personal struggles. It's not just about what you face outside of work, but how you give that in the workplace. Each word felt like a wave crashing against her resolve, stirring the insecurities lodged within. But in that moment of conflict, clarity emerged. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about owning her story and learning to navigate this new reality of vulnerability mixed with professionalism. Perhaps that's where the growth lies, Jenna stated, surprising even herself with the steadiness in her voice. If I don't take ownership of my vulnerabilities, how can I bring that strength to my colleagues and my patients? I want to push our boundaries and innovate how we support each other through our struggles. Her supervisor regarded her thoughtfully. Innovation takes courage, Jenna. You're asking for more than just a title. You're seeking to redefine what it means to be strong in our field. With each passing moment, Jenna felt the tide of the conversation shift. For the first time, her truth could redefine her professional identity rather than diminish it. But was this acknowledgement enough to carve a new path for her? As the meeting drew to a close, Jenna felt a burgeoning hope intertwined with trepidation. Could she really forge her journey from this moment, leaning into her vulnerabilities instead of shying away? With her heart pounding, she exited the office, a mix of exhilaration and fear coursing through her veins. Jenna knew she had taken a significant step, yet uncertainty loomed larger than ever. Would this newfound voice resonate in the larger sphere of her career, or would she find the same walls waiting to close in again? And that's when she received the call, a family emergency that would challenge everything she fought to reshape. Jenna gripped her phone tightly, the urgency of the call sending her pulse racing anew. The voice on the other end broke through her moment of triumph, shattering the hopeful moment she had just experienced. Her brother's words were laced with panic, detailing their father's sudden health crisis. In that instant, the world she had begun to reshape felt fragile, like glass on the brink of shattering. As she ended the call, Jenna felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. She had committed to her growth at work, ready to leverage her vulnerabilities as strengths, yet here was a stark reminder of the demands of her personal life. Her father's needs loomed large, and for a moment, she was consumed by doubt. Should she prioritize her father's health over her budding career ambitions? The decision churned in her mind as she navigated through the offices, her heart heavy but steadfast. Each step felt like a mental negotiation between two essential parts of her identity, the dedicated healthcare professional and the devoted daughter. But perhaps this was an opportunity, a chance to apply the very lessons she had recently embraced. Jenna returned home to find her father in the hospital, surrounded by sterile sheets and the steady beep of machines. He appeared small and frail in the hospital bed, and a rush of vulnerability washed over her, compelling her to survey her surroundings. Each respirator whir or distant conversation reminded her of the delicate nature of life, and in that stark space she felt her purpose resonate clearer than ever. She was not just a nurse, but a source of comfort, resilience, and strength. As she sat beside him, she engaged him in light conversation, recalling fond memories, glimpses of their shared laughter while her heart beat a steady rhythm of fear. Yet, amidst it all, Jenna discovered a hidden well of strength within her. This was not merely a test of her ability to balance two demanding worlds. It was a compelling case study of her resilience. With her father's fragility laid bare, Jenna began to confront her own fears. What if she could enhance her caregiving approach, merging her personal experiences with her professional role? There lay an untapped reservoir of empathy she could nurture, a way to bridge her unique struggles with the needs of others. Her father needed her to advocate for him, but perhaps she could learn to advocate for herself in the process. Each day she spent in the hospital turned into avenues of insight, revealing the intimate intricacies of patient care. She noted how staff navigated their own personal challenges and understood the little moments that made a difference. The anxiety she originally felt about balancing work and family transformed into a quest for innovation. Jenna contemplated how she could cultivate an environment at her workplace that acknowledged personal struggles and facilitated growth. Just when she thought she had taken a significant step forward, new complexities emerged. Would the insights she gained from this tumultuous time truly reshape her professional identity? Could her father's health crisis be the catalyst not just for her personal understanding but for a more profound transformation in the entire nursing environment? As Jenna prepared to return to work, her mind buzzed with possibilities. She could pitch new training programs, implement peer support systems, and lead discussions on resilience. Yet the key dilemma lingered: how could she do it all while remaining present for her father, knowing that life could shift unexpectedly at any moment? Jenna took a breath, a mix of resolve and uncertainty swirling within her. The upcoming meeting with her supervisor, where she would share her ambitions, loomed ahead. It was no longer just about a title. It was about embracing the full spectrum of her experience, work, family, and the intertwined routes of both. But as she gathered her thoughts, the phone rang again, another emergency call that would send her spiraling deeper into this critical intersection of life and career. Jenna stood still, her heart beating wildly as she answered the phone. The familiar voice on the other end delivered news she had dreaded: a colleague was injured in a fall at the hospital. As the words sunk in, a rush of instinctual responsibility surged through her. She was prepared to step back into her role, yet the ever-present weight of her father's situation pulled her in two directions. She took a deep breath, trying to ground herself in the chaos. Memories flickered, reminding her of her father's unwavering support throughout her career. It was his encouragement that propelled her into nursing. He deserved her strength now more than ever. But she would be needed at the hospital too. Standing on the teetering edge of obligations, she felt gravity tugging on both sides of her life. The emergency call pushed her into action. Jenna rushed to the hospital, a flurry of thoughts colliding as she parked. She could feel the energy of the place, the frantic footsteps, urgent voices, and the clatter of equipment. But she also sensed an undercurrent of camaraderie among the staff, a shared pulse that reminded her of the community she was part of, even in the midst of her personal storm. As she entered the unit, she scanned the room, her focus sharpening with each familiar face of her colleagues. Jenna's previous decision to advocate for a supportive workplace reverberated in her mind. She glanced at the busy nursing station, where whispers about the recent incident echoed. Their sharp insights contrasted with her own internal doubts, and she suddenly understood something profound. Real strength isn't merely about carrying burdens but sharing them. With renewed determination, she dove into the situation, collaborating with her team to stabilize the injured colleague. As she assumed her role, she noticed how her hands moved with confidence, unearthing hidden capabilities she hadn't known existed under the weight of her personal grief. Each action assessing vitals, providing comfort, supporting her team felt increasingly aligned with her vision of resilience. During a brief lull, Jenna walked to the break room, where she noticed a poster about an upcoming training program on stress management for healthcare professionals. An idea sparked. This was her chance to create something transformative, an outlet for her colleagues to confront their struggles while fostering connection and growth. Why not incorporate personal experiences into our approach? She mused, her thoughts racing. What if they could share their stories and support one another? Perhaps a series of workshops could open up discussions about personal loss, anxiety, and the emotional toll that stemmed from the job. The seeds of innovation began to bloom in her mind as she envisioned a supportive environment, inspired by her father's current plight and her own journey. Yet, even amidst this surge of excitement, a twinge of fear flickered. What if her ideas were dismissed? What if her time was stretched too thin? These questions swirled in her mind, but the urgency she felt in that moment urged her forward, emboldening her to confront those fears. After all, wasn't her experience the very reason to advocate for change? As the shift progressed, Jenna's heart raced not just from the demands of the job, but from the daunting challenge ahead. She contemplated how she would articulate her proposal to her supervisor. Suddenly, it wasn't just about sharing her thoughts. It was about channeling her experiences into an actionable plan that could benefit others. As her shift ended, a renewed sense of purpose washed over Jenna. She had the foundation upon which to build something significant not only for her team but for herself. But just as she was about to leave, another call interrupted her thoughts, a sudden change in her father's condition. The urgency in her brother's voice echoed through the receiver, shattering the moment she had begun to build. Jenna closed her eyes, the gravity of what lay ahead hitting her once more. The moment of clarity she had felt moments ago flickered like a flame in the wind. Was her resolve enough to stand firm in the face of a new upheaval? It was time to face the critical junction of her life once more, poised between personal and professional worlds now entangled more than ever. What choices would she make when thrust into life's chaos? Jenna felt her breath catch as she clutched the phone, her brother's voice still echoing in her ears. The gravity of her father's situation loomed over her like a heavy fog, yet beneath that fog lay a burgeoning determination. She had just begun to glimpse her own strength. Now, in the face of fear, she wondered if she was prepared to embrace it fully. Rushing back to her car, the adrenaline coursed through her. She had to focus. Every moment counted, both for her father and for her colleagues at the hospital. Still, the urgency of her father's condition weighed heavily alongside the flickering flame of her professional aspirations. The bold vision of workshops and support systems danced in her thoughts, untamed yet too fragile in the face of reality. Arriving at the hospital, she was met with an energy that felt almost electric. The staff moved with purpose, a choreography of resilience in the face of chaos. Jenna paused just long enough to gather her thoughts before diving back into the fray. Each patient she encountered reminded her of the critical balance she had to strike, not just as a nurse but as a human being who had endured and thrived against the odds. While helping a nurse retrieve supplies, Jenna overheard a hushed conversation about the very training program she had been considering. Colleagues expressed doubts about its necessity, questioning how useful it could be amidst the ever-pressing demands of their jobs. Their skepticism stirred a fire of defiance within her. Maybe they're right, Jenna thought, an internal argument bubbling to the surface. But isn't that the point? We need these conversations if we want to be better. Or do we just keep pushing through? Yet doubt flickered in her mind, whispering unhelpful narratives of failure. What if the support she envisioned was met with apathy? As Jenna organized the supply room, she felt her hands trembling slightly, an outward manifestation of her anxiety, and wondered if this was her opportunity, or an ultimate distraction from her father's condition. She decided to channel that unease. Approaching her supervisor felt like standing on a tightrope stretched precariously between her personal crisis and her professional ambition. With each step, Jenna felt the determination build within her, fueled by thoughts of her father's encouragement. He had always instilled in her the belief that she was capable of greatness, empowering her to face the world head-on. "Let us do this," she muttered, steeling her resolve. She sought out her supervisor, carefully composing her presentation in her mind, rehearsing her pitch as she walked down the bustling hall. But when she finally reached the office door, hesitation gripped her. Would her ideas resonate, or seem trivial against the backdrop of life and death situations? The same questions weighed heavily upon her heart. To confront the truth about her workplace, and the emotional toll it exacted, was no small task, yet the urgency of her father's condition permeated her thoughts. Taking a breath, Jenna knocked. The tap echoed in her ears, a herald to an approaching storm. "Come in," her supervisor called, and Jenna opened the door, stepping into a world of responsibility that leveled her anxiety, if only momentarily. In that moment, as she found her stance, she could feel the duality of her life pressing against her, begging for resolution. Would she stand firm to advocate for change, or would she retreat into the shadows of doubt once more? "What can I do for you, Jenna?" Her supervisor asked, glancing up from her paperwork. It all hung in the balance. The moment was here, and time felt still as Jenna prepared to make the first move that could change everything. Actually, I'd like to discuss a proposal, she began, firming her grip on her purpose. With each word, she felt herself peel back the layers of uncertainty. As she poured her heart into her ideas, Jenna could finally see the horizon of her potential. But just as she began to find her voice, her phone buzzed in her pocket, an unwelcome reminder of the storm lurking just beyond her. Reach. Sorry, one moment, she said, a flicker of fear darting across her mind. Could she afford to balance the weight of her professional aspirations while the personal turmoil of her father's condition loomed over her? With her heart pounding yet again, Jenna braced herself for whatever news awaited her on the other end of the line. What if this call shattered the fragile foundation she was beginning to build? The choices ahead felt more daunting now than ever, and she could only hope that her courage was enough to see her through the chaos. Would this moment be the turning point for Jenna, or another fracture in a life that was already testing her resolve? Jenna hesitated a heartbeat longer, the phone's relentless buzzing turning her thoughts into a cacophony. With a determined breath, she set her gaze on her supervisor. Just a second, she blurted, gripping the phone tightly as she stepped back from the desk, her heart racing as she swiped to answer. Hello? The voice on the other end was her brother again. Instinctively, she felt a wave of resentment rise. Couldn't he see she was trying to focus on something important? But the crack in his voice shattered that thought immediately. Jenna, it's Dad, he murmured, and tears threatened to spill. The doctors say he is stable for now, but we need to talk. The walls of the hospital seemed to close in as she processed his words. Stability in this context meant a temporary reprieve while the battle raged on, and as she replied with vague assurances, Jenna's mind wandered back to the conversation with her supervisor. The urgency to bring her ideas to fruition jostled against the fear of her father's decline. Can we meet tonight? Her brother urged. I need you here. Of course, I'll be there, she promised, her voice steadying as a flood of emotion washed over her. Her father's health was paramount. But what was happening at the hospital? Each moment she spent thinking about her father's condition pulled her away from potential change at work. The tumult within her tightened like a noose. Jenna? Her brother's voice brought her back. You still there? Yeah, just processing. I'll be there. She hung up, feeling a familiar knot in her stomach. Suddenly, she felt trapped in a cycle of dual responsibilities, her father needing her, and her colleagues counting on her to make a difference. Steeling her resolve, she turned back toward the office, summoning the remnants of her hope to share her vision. Is everything all right? Her supervisor asked, concern tinting her voice. Actually, Jenna began, her heart thrumming with a mix of urgency and newfound clarity. I think we really need to consider the emotional support training program. Caring for patients goes beyond being medically sound, it's about being emotionally resilient. Her supervisor raised an eyebrow, intrigued as Jenna continued. So many of us are donning masks, performing as if we can manage everything, and I worry about the burnout. This program could cultivate a nurturing environment where we can actually check in with one another. Each word felt like a defiance against the demons of doubt. She had moments of clarity before, but they always seemed to merge into forgettable flickers of inspiration. This was different. Jenna could feel the tide of commitment rolling through her veins. She was fighting for the very heart of healthcare. Interesting perspective, her supervisor replied, tilting her head thoughtfully. But have you thought about how we fit this into an already overloaded schedule? The staff is already hanging on by a thread. That's precisely it. We can't wait until we break. We need to build a foundation now, rather than react when it's too late, Jenna urged, the urgency of her father's condition igniting her fervor. Support isn't fluff, it's a necessity. I know I'm new at this, but I can lead a small group to begin implementing the program, gauge interest, get feedback, the groundwork. I want to invest in my colleagues. For a moment, silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the bustling hospital. Jenna held her breath, anticipation thick in the air. You're passionate, her supervisor admitted finally, a faint smile betraying her skepticism. But we need to ensure that passion translates into action. Then let us turn passion into a plan, Jenna replied, her voice unwavering. I'll research similar programs, and I can draft a preliminary proposal to present at the next staff meeting. We could start small and build up momentum from there. All right, her supervisor said slowly, a glimmer of encouragement in her eyes. Prove to me this isn't just ambition pushing you, prove its necessity. Jenna could feel a spark ignite within her. She had taken the first step toward realization, yet uncertainty lingered in her mind. Could she truly follow through? The stakes felt higher now, an interconnected web where professional growth and familial allegiance collided. As they wrapped their discussion, Jenna knew she needed to embrace this moment, but her heart clenched at the thought of her father. Would she find a way to balance both worlds, or would the weight of her family obligations pull her down? With her resolve cemented but the threat of future despair looming, Jenna stepped back into the hospital's lively chaos, a blend of hope and fear propelling her forward. She had ignited the flame of change. Now it was time to see how bright it could shine, or if it would be extinguished by the winds of personal turmoil. The challenge lay waiting on the horizon, and she could only wonder what protruded in the shadows ahead. What if her father's health took another turn, undermining her burgeoning initiative? Or perhaps, in this chaos, she would uncover skills she never knew she possessed. Would she be the architect of her dreams, or would she be consumed by the undercurrents of worry? As Jenna navigated the crowded halls of the hospital, each step felt heavier with the weight of her dual existence. Her heart was torn between two realities: the urgent, sterile world of her profession and the intimate, warm embrace of her family. She could feel the second-hand anxiety dripping from the walls, each hurried footstep and concerned whisper sharpening her resolve yet tugging at her heartstrings. She found herself at her desk, staring at the blank screen of her computer, the cursor blinking impatiently as if it sensed her turmoil. With each heartbeat, her father's health loomed larger in her mind, a stark reminder of her fragility. Yet the spark of hope she ignited during her conversation with her supervisor flickered alongside her fears. Could she truly make a difference while balancing the turmoil of her personal life? Determined to channel her apprehensions into something constructive, Jenna opened a new document. She began to type fervently, outlining the emotional support training program she'd proposed. The words poured out, fueled by the necessity to create a safe environment for her colleagues to voice their vulnerabilities, to break the cycle of silence that suffocated so many in their line of work. Emotional resilience is as crucial as medical expertise, she wrote, punctuating her thoughts with bold statements. Each sentence struck her like a drumbeat of purpose, the rhythm compelling her to build something tangible from scattered ideas. She could almost visualize the workshops, the open discussions, the shared laughter that could arise in places otherwise burdened by despair. As she stood to grab a cup of coffee and clear her mind, her supervisor walked by, her expression pregnant with thought. How's the proposal coming along? Jenna hesitated momentarily, grappling with her self-doubt. It's coming together. I really think it could work. The staff needs more than just skill, they need to feel supported. A flicker of approval crossed her supervisor's face. Good. I want to see that fire translate into actionable steps. At the next staff meeting, gather whatever support you can. You'll need allies in this. Allies. The thought lodged itself within her mind. Who among her colleagues would resonate with her vision? Who would become a pillar of strength alongside her? Faces of her coworkers flashed before her, a mix of contemplation and fatigue. Some she had shared shifts with, others barely familiar. The fear of isolation gripped her, but it also stirred something fierce within. Jenna realized she needed to extend beyond her own anxieties, invite others into her mission. As she made a mental list of potential collaborators, her heart swelled with tentative hope. Would they share their vulnerabilities? Could they become a collective force for change? Emboldened, she drafted a brief invitation for an informal meeting, prioritizing connection over formalities. Let us talk about emotional well-being in our work, she typed, resisting the urge to be overly polished. She needed authenticity, something genuine to draw others in. Your voices matter. Later that evening, As Jenna drove to the hospital to meet her brother, the weight of her responsibilities pressed heavily upon her. The familiar building loomed ahead, its glowing lights pulsating like a heartbeat. She focused on the road, reminding herself that every conversation she initiated at work would contribute to healing both for her colleagues and for her father. Anxiety spiraled within as she prepared to sit with her brother, to discuss their father's condition and what it would mean moving forward. Would he understand her need to advance her initiative despite the family crisis? They were teetering on a precipice of hope and trepidation. She was wrestling with the need to drive her passion for emotional support, while upholding her role within her family. Jenna, her brother's voice cut through her thoughts as they settled into the hospital cafeteria. "Are you okay? You've been so quiet." She forced a smile, but his question struck deep. But how did she explain the roaring emotions that raged silently within her? "Family, work, it's all a lot, isn't it?" he continued, his voice tinged with understanding. His words washed over her, igniting a new desire within. What if embracing this chaos meant discovering parts of herself she had buried? What if her fears could fuel her fight for change, guiding her transformation into someone more than just a caretaker in the family and a fledgling leader at work? As the unspoken tension hung between them, Jenna steeled herself to share what she envisioned at work, to express how her father's condition was pushing her to confront her own untapped potential. Would there be a time and a place to meld these two worlds and emerge stronger? With that thought swirling in her mind, Jenna opened her mouth, ready to bridge her personal chaos to the drive she had ignited at work. Could she articulate her ambitions alongside the fear gripping her heart? And in doing so, would she find a way to fuse the two into one resilient truth, or would she remain fractured, forever caught between the two demanding arenas of her life? Jenna's breath hitched as she looked across the cafeteria table at her brother. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead seemed to echo her uncertainty. She had thought long and hard about how to frame her thoughts, but every word felt loaded with the tension of impending vulnerability. "I've been thinking about work a lot lately," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. Her brother leaned in, curiosity replacing his earlier concern. "What about it?" She hesitated, weighing her words like a surgeon contemplating the depth of a cut. "There's this emotional support program I want to start. I think it could really help the staff cope better, with everything we face daily." The question in his eyes shifted to a glimmer of interest. "And you think they'll join in? Support it like you do?" "I hope so," she replied, a rush of conviction fueling her voice. "But I need to gather momentum. I want to make it a safe space for everyone, a place where we can be honest about what we're going through. That kind of honesty has been hard to find, especially now." His expression changed, the weight of the situation deepening between them. "You're trying to fix things," he said slowly, "but what about fixing you?" Her heart raced at his words, each syllable digging deeper into her psyche. Was he right? Had her focus on creating a sanctuary for her colleagues obscured her own need for support? It was a possibility she hadn't dared to consider. "I'm fine, really," Jenna deflected, even as dawn began to break on the realization that her facade hardly withstood scrutiny. "I just think that if I can help others, I'll feel better too." "It doesn't have to be just that," he replied with gentle insistence. "You shouldn't have to carry it alone. You're allowed to seek help, even in your own mess. You can't pour from an empty cup, Jenna." His words, though rooted in care, ignited a deeper conflict within her. If she truly embraced vulnerability, would she risk losing the carefully cultivated control she clung to? But then, how could she advocate for an environment that fostered openness if she herself resisted it? Maybe she began, her resolve faltering. The reality of their father's deteriorating condition loomed like a specter, casting a long shadow over her doubts. What kind of leader would she be if she failed to acknowledge her genuine fear and uncertainty? Jenna leaned back, the metal chair creaking beneath her weight, and closed her eyes for a moment. She envisioned the interactions with her colleagues, the laughter, the shared sorrow, the unguarded moments of authenticity. It was worth pursuing, but what if she could truly lead by showing her own struggle? The conversation shifted to family updates, But Jenna found her mind drifting back to her project. She left the cafeteria with remnants of her brother's insights echoing in her thoughts, wrestling with the delicate balance between ambition and the necessity of sharing her own vulnerabilities. As she returned to her desk, a familiar urgency enveloped her. It danced with echoes of her conversation, mingling with the heavy atmosphere of the hospital. Jennifer's fingers trembled slightly as she typed out a draft for her meeting invitation to her colleagues. She revised it, adding a phrase that resonated deeply with her emerging understanding: let us not only discuss emotional well-being, but how we, too, can be supported in our journey. With each keystroke, she was unearthing a layer of herself she had buried under the weight of her responsibilities. This wasn't merely a professional endeavor. It was a quest for authenticity, an exploration into the very essence of what it meant to be human amidst the chaos. Suddenly, a bold thought clawed its way to the forefront. If she could engage her colleagues in honest dialogue, perhaps she could reflect her own truths back to them, a dual empowering exchange. Was this how real change began? By revealing oneself as authentically flawed? Jenna sighed, fatigue settling in, yet she felt invigorated by the storm brewing inside. The time has come to face my own reality, she whispered to herself. Resolute, she glanced at her phone, her heart pounding with anticipation. Perhaps the journey ahead was not solely anchored in the purpose of helping others heal, but in her own unfolding, a transformation laden with uncertainty yet ripe with potential. As she prepared for the meeting, the prospect of standing before her colleagues felt increasingly exhilarating, yet daunting. Would they embrace her message? Could she really let them see her whole self, or would the fear of judgment hold her back? In that moment of hesitation, something shifted. One more revelatory thought surged forward. What if this leads to discovering truths about myself I never knew existed? Determined, she pressed send on the invitation, feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with trepidation. The upcoming meeting wasn't just about others, it was about her stepping into a new realm of understanding, one fraught with challenges but promising growth. And as she sat back, exhilarated and terrified, she realized that the greatest lesson she was about to embark on might very well be her own. But would she find the courage to fully embrace this duality? Or would she falter when the truth demanded she lay bare her fears? Jenna paced the small office, her heart still racing from pressing send on the meeting invitation. The snippets of conversations replayed in her mind, each resonating with the weight of the unknown. She thought about the various outcomes, a mix of support, skepticism, or even silence from her colleagues. It was a daunting prospect, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something profound would unfold. The hospital, usually so familiar, felt different today. Every sterile corner morphed into a reminder of the emotional turmoil that surrounded her. Patients moved through the hallways, their faces stricken with pain or reflecting hope, and Jenna was struck by the realization that every one of them carried a story almost as heavy as her own. It ignited a sense of urgency within her. She had to address not just her own fears but also the fears she sensed around her. As Jenna prepared her notes for the meeting, a nagging sense of self-doubt crept in. What if they didn't resonate with her ideas? What if they treated her vulnerability as weakness? She clenched her fists, taking a deep breath to center herself as she scribbled quick reminders in the margins of her paper: courage over fear, be authentic, encourage openness. Each reminder felt like an anchor as she battled the waves of uncertainty crashing over her. The clock ticked on, each minute stretching longer than the last. She glanced at the conference room, visualizing the palpable tension that would fill the air. Would her colleagues see the sincerity behind her initiative? She was ready to share her vision but also entrusted them with an unexpected gift, her own vulnerabilities. Would that be enough to create the empathy she sought? A knock on the office door jolted her from her thoughts. It was Katie, one of her colleagues. The nervous fidgeting of her hands mirrored Jenna's own internal turmoil. Hey Jenna. I saw the meeting invite and wanted to check in. Are you sure you want to do this? The question caught Jenna off guard. Why wouldn't I? She replied, but the edge in her voice gave her away. Katie took a step inside, her brows furrowing in concern. Because it's not easy to talk about feelings. I mean, it's heavy stuff. Jenna chose her words carefully, knowing this was a pivotal moment. I think it's precisely because it's heavy that we need to talk about it. If we keep it bottled up, it'll just fester, and we'll carry that weight alone. There was a contemplative silence before Katie responded, "You're right. But what if no one wants to share? What if it turns into an awkward silence?" Jenna weighed her response, contemplating the authenticity of vulnerability. The first step is showing up, and sometimes that's enough. Even if it's awkward, it's a start. We have to break the ice, or it will always loom over us. As they discussed the potential barriers, Jenna felt a flicker of empowerment in the conversation. It was in these vulnerable exchanges that alliances could form. She realized she wasn't only fighting against her fears but igniting a chain reaction. Every moment of honesty might prompt someone else to confront their own. Katie nodded, her eyes widening with understanding. "I suppose you're right. It might just open the door for others." The two women shared a moment of mutual resolve, a silent acknowledgement of the importance of this endeavor. Jenna's pulse quickened. She was no longer alone in her fears. The conference room began to fill as colleagues trickled in, the air thick with unspoken tension. Each face held its own story, but Jenna was determined to be the catalyst that ignited change. As she took her place at the front, facing her team, Jenna steadied her breath. The moment had arrived, laden with the potential to shift paradigms. She knew she had to embrace her journey and, in doing so, invite them into hers, flaws, uncertainties, and all. Taking a deep breath, she opened the meeting, her voice trembling slightly yet resolute. "I know this is uncharted territory, and it might feel uncomfortable, but it's time we confront the challenges we face not just as colleagues but as humans." The room fell silent. All she could hear was her heartbeat, a poignant rhythm that underscored her courage. Would they embrace her narrative as she hoped, or would she leave the meeting feeling more alone than before? With that thought lingering, a new realization swept over her. Perhaps the real emotional support she sought was waiting just beyond the threshold of this moment, and in revealing herself, she could uncover truths that would ultimately nourish her spirit. But as she gazed at her colleagues, she wondered, how deep would she have to dive into her own vulnerabilities to truly inspire them to do the same? Jenna stood at the front of the conference room, the air heavy with anticipation. She felt the eyes of her colleagues trained on her, each one a reflection of her own uncertain spirit, yet beneath the apprehension lay a river of purpose. This was the moment she had envisioned, a confluence of her two worlds, the personal and the professional, spiraling together to form a single, resilient identity. "I know this is uncharted territory," she began, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "But perhaps that's exactly what we need. Together, let us explore how to weave our own experiences into our work." The collective tension seemed to loosen slightly, replaced with intrigue. Jenna leaned into her narrative, succinctly detailing her father's health struggles and how they mirrored the challenges faced in their demanding profession. She shared how she had almost succumbed to the weight of expectations, drowning under the pressures of being both caretaker and patient. With each story, she peeled back layers of her vulnerability, offering glimpses into her struggles, even as she drew strength from the very transparency she feared would expose her weakness. "It doesn't only take medical expertise to heal. Emotional resilience is just as crucial," she articulated, her conviction rising like a tide. "Only by sharing our burdens can we truly support one another." There was a stirring among her colleagues, nods of acknowledgement rippling through the crowd. As she facilitated the first round of discussions, Jenna saw a flicker of recognition in their faces, the realization that they weren't alone. One by one, her colleagues shared snippets of their own stories, the nurse juggling schoolwork and late-night shifts, the doctor wrestling with self-doubt after a critical incident, the medical assistant grappling with personal loss amidst patient care. The atmosphere shifted from one of reluctance to shared camaraderie. Jenna felt an electric charge igniting her spirit. In liberating her own struggles, she had paved the way for them to bring forth their wounds, their fears, and their humanity. "Imagine the strength we could cultivate if we allowed ourselves to be real," she encouraged, her enthusiasm glowing brightly. "If we could create a safe space to acknowledge our life experiences, wouldn't it enrich our lives and enhance patient care?" As voices merged into a chorus of mixed support and apprehension, the discussion blossomed into collective brainstorming, ideas bouncing around like sparks igniting into flames. Questions about logistics and possible frameworks filled the room, and Jenna felt her fear dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of achievement. At the close of the meeting, her supervisor approached her with a wide smile, the warm light in her eyes reflecting an appreciation once kept under wraps. "Jenna, your ability to share your story and invite others in is truly inspiring. This program can be a game-changer for all of us." In that moment, plans for the emotional support program began to take shape. Jenna stepped forward into her professional identity, the invisible weight of inadequacy lifting as she embraced her growing competence. Not only had she advocated for a change that could transform their culture, but she had also stepped into the arena of leadership once feared, now a mantle of pride. Weeks rolled into months, and as the program launched, Jenna witnessed her initial vision bloom into a sanctuary where vulnerability transformed into strength. Colleagues developed deeper connections, no longer merely colleagues but co-pilots navigating the turbulence of life together. Recognition came, not through titles or accolades, but through the palpable growth they all experienced. The department flourished as emotional well-being became integrated, fostering compassion amongst staff and creating a ripple effect that resonated throughout the hospital. One day, amidst a bustling shift filled with laughter and heartfelt exchanges, Jenna caught sight of Mr. Thompson during his visit. He smiled, a knowing twinkle in his eyes, as if to say she had proven that vulnerability is indeed a form of strength. Standing in that moment, Jenna felt a profound fulfillment pull through her. The past year, once marred by fragility and uncertainty, had reshaped her into a beacon of tenacity and innovation. She no longer identified solely as a caregiver but as an authentic voice advocating for holistic healing. Recognized for her contributions, Jenna was invited to share her experience at a state conference on healthcare innovation. Standing before a room full of professionals, she knew this was more than just an invitation. It was a confirmation that she was now a significant player in reshaping her field. Only by embracing our whole selves can we create resonance in the lives of others, she concluded her speech, her heart swelling with pride. Years of doubt had transformed into a tapestry woven with determination, authenticity, and power. Jenna had not only conquered her fears but had paved the way for change, exemplifying a new standard of strength, one that was rooted in vulnerability, connectedness, and shared human experience. With this, she stepped into her future with solid confidence, fully aware that the journey ahead would demand resilience. Yet, she was armed with the richest lesson of all, that connection is power. Now is the time to heed this call for authenticity and growth. Show your support, and subscribe immediately to the channel. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire you to embrace change. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let the world hear stories of transformation. Comment below your reactions and theories about how you find strength in vulnerability, and let us continue this meaningful conversation.